Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. Wow, it's wonderful to see such a large crowd. I guess a good taco dinner will bring people in, as well as the great share that Rabbi Goldschneider gave. And anyway, forgive me, I'm a little a lot under the weather. But Baruch Hashem, it is raining, and that's in Eretz Yisrael. That's always a siman bracha, and I want to wish people a Chodesh Tov. And as a little digression or an introduction, I want to talk a little bit about perhaps the least understood month of the Jewish calendar, and that is the month of Cheshvan. You know, they tell the story about a Russian peasant who lived in a Hasidic community, and he noticed that there was many parties and get-togethers and fabrengens that were always going around. So he figured this is a wonderful religion. Always parties, eating, drinking, singing, dancing. So somehow he got himself converted. I don't know how exactly. And Rabbi, right. And then he told his friend, Ivan, that this is a wonderful religion. You got to join it. You know, we have wonderful parties, we eat and we drink and we sing and we dance. So Ivan didn't get around to converting till kind of the middle of the summer, and it was already the month of Tammuz. So he immediately gets confronted with the 17th of Tammuz and the 3 weeks and the 9 days and no haircuts and no meat and no weddings and no music. And he goes over to his friend and says, you know, you really tricked me into this. You told me this is a religion where we have parties and frolicking all the time, and all I get is one restriction after another restriction. So his friend looked at him and said, you know, you're really right. Ever since you've joined, we've been going downhill. But anyone that knows the Jewish calendar obviously knows that indeed we have a calendar like life itself, full of extremes of joy, extremes of grief, crying, laughing, singing, dancing, moments of introspection where each person has to grapple with their own inner demons as they try to make peace with the Almighty. And then we have times which are social, in which we emphasize our community and our togetherness. And the funny thing is, this is not only indicative of the calendar as a whole, but this in fact is the experience of a single month, the month that is ending, the month of Tishrei. Think about the different multiplicity of emotions that we had to go through, that we went through, in just a few weeks, in less than 4 weeks. Introspection, crying, sobbing, begging God for forgiveness. The unrestrained joy of Sukkot, culminating, of course, in Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. Times of introspection, times of sharing, times of private reflection and meditation, times of community. Because you see, Rosh Hashanah is a template for the entire year, and therefore God is basically saying you have to experience. You know the exhibit they have, Mini Israel, near the there's that. That's kind of a miniature exhibit of the entire country, like an acre or 2 acres. You can see everything. So at the beginning of the year, we have to experience all of the different modalities that life puts our way, so we will be able to know how to respond when we need to respond. Because the point is, many of us are naturally geared to a certain modality. You know, some people love, maybe most people love Purim and Simchas Torah, but you know, maybe you might be surprised, or maybe you won't be. Some people actually love the 9th of Av. Not in the sense that, you know, it's a happy day, you dance on the table, although when Mashiach comes that'll be the case, but because they enjoy the opportunity for introspection and meditation and thinking about the serious issues of life. So some people gravitate towards one aspect of our holiday cycle, and some gravitate towards another. But God is basically saying, you've got to be capable of both. If one is not capable of feeling deep grief over the Churban Beit HaMikdash, you're not capable of feeling deep joy for the Torah. And vice versa. If you don't feel joy for the Torah, then why are you so sad if there's no Beit HaMikdash, if that doesn't mean that much to you? And therefore, the whole lesson of Tishrei is to learn how to be a total person. Try to incorporate within our personality the multiplicity of emotions that human beings are capable of, and utilizing those emotions in a constructive, positive way. But we then come to the month of Cheshvan. Now, the month of Cheshvan, its official name is MarCheshvan, and There is a popular vort, which is almost probably wrong, and I'll tell you right off the bat that it is probably incorrect, but it's a very, very well-known thought that the reason the month is called MarCheshvan is Mar is a lashon of merihut, bitterness, because this is a bitter month, because it is the only month in the Jewish calendar that does not have a chag or a special holiday. Now let's test that for a moment. Okay, Cheshvan doesn't. Kislev, of course, has Hanukkah. Tevet has the second half of Hanukkah. Shvat has Tu B'Shvat. We're already stretching a little bit, but Tu B'Shvat is a festive day. Adar is Purim. Nisan is Pesach. Iyar has both Pesach Sheni, which is a pretty big stretch, and if you are a Zionist, as we should be, you have Yom Ha'atzmaut as well as Yom Yerushalayim. Sivan, you have Shavuos. Now Tammuz is a tough one. Tammuz, actually, the only notable event in Tammuz is the fast day of the 17th of Tammuz, but Chazal do tell us that all of those fast days in commemoration of the destruction of the temple shall become very festive and happy days, so we treat it as potentially a happy day. Av has the 15th of Av, which is a very happy day, and the 9th of Av will become a happy day. That's the day Mashiach will be born. Okay, so far so good. Elul actually does not have a Chag or a Yom Tov, but Elul is already in anticipation of all the Chagim that are coming, as well as the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu went up after the sin of the Egel. Moshe Rabbeinu went up for 40 days and 40 nights from Rosh Chodesh El to Yom Kippur, and that is why Elul is called Yemei Ratzon, days of grace, and therefore it's kind of the whole month is a holiday month. Okay, Cheshvan has nothing. But here I want to, now the reason why I say etymologically it's probably not correct is that most historians point out that Chazal already say that the names of the months in the Jewish calendar are of Babylonian origin. They date from the 70 years of exile. That is why you don't not find those names earlier than the book of Esther and the book of Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Prior to the Babylonian exile, we had other names. We either went with the Torah's dating, first month, second month, counting it from Nisan, or there were some other names. For example, Tishrei was called Yarach Ha'etanim, the month of the mighty ones, based on a tradition that the Avos were born in the month of Tishrei. Cheshvan was called the month of Bul. Bul might be connected to Mabul, perhaps, because the rainy season begins in Cheshvan, as well as the Noach's flood began in the month of Cheshvan as well. So based on that, historians have shown that MarCheshvan is actually Akkadian for the 8th month, based on their cycle. So that name just got carried over. Also, Mar in biblical Hebrew is often used for raindrops and the like. So there are different etymologies. That's not so important. Yes, even before Hanukkah. Yeah, absolutely. From the Babylonian exile, yeah.
They called it Mar.
No, that I don't know. I'm not sure the earliest
So then
usage
it wouldn't
of it.
be just like what else would be.
Right. I understand. Yeah. I'd have to check exactly when MarCheshvan came into use. But be it as it may,
The argument is because it was Noach Shvan, like the Chesed switched from one word to another. So it was Noach Shvan, it came out Cheshvan.
Okay.
I think it's 8 like
Okay, right. Very good. But be it as it may, even if that's not the origin of MarCheshvan, it's a popular thought, but the idea is it is true, Cheshvan does not have a Yom Tov. So here I want to share with you a thought from Rav Tzadok of Lublin, and he says the following. The earliest Kabbalistic book that we have is said to be the book that is called Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. According to some traditions, it goes all the way back to Avraham Avinu. Some even say Adam Harishon, very, very early in any event. And the Sefer Yetzirah discusses, you can even get an English translation. I mean, we have the Sefer, but we don't really understand it that well. It discusses how, through the combination of the spiritual forces in the alphabet, one is able to create things. Chazal even say there were Tanoim and Amoraim who would create a calf through the Tzerufei combinations, Osiot of Sefer Yetzirah, and they would shech the calf and eat it every Erev Shabbat. There's a discussion in Poskim If a golem, like the golem is created through Sefer Yetzirah, if a golem is created through Sefer Yetzirah, does he count for a minion and the like? It's discussed. The Mishnah Berurah actually alludes to it in a footnote. Someone used the analogy to cloning, but cloning is obviously not the same thing at all. Cloning is a biological process. It is not a supernatural or miraculous process. But be it as it may, one of the things that Sefer Yetzirah does is every single month of the calendar is assigned a letter. Obviously only 12 letters are used, but is assigned a letter, and the letter is linked to a chush, to a certain sensory function. And Rav Tzadok likes to go through every month the letter and the sensory function. For the month of Cheshvan, which is the month I want to talk about tonight, the letter is the letter Nun, and the sensory function is Reach, the ability to smell. And the way Sefer Yetzirah is worded is Himlich Ot Nun Bereach. God took the letter of Nun, He made it the Melech over the month of over the Chush Hareach, and the combination of Nun and Reach generates this Zaman, this Tekufa, that we call the month of Cheshvan. Obviously, it's a very obscure formulation. What does Nun have to do with Cheshvan? It happens to have a Nun, but no, other months have it as well.
It is a very nasal sound.
Say again?
It's a very nasal
It's a
sound.
nasal sound, okay. Yeah, and what does that do with Reach? So Rab Tzadok explains the following. Nun, in Chazal's symbolism, represents the notion of falling down, losing ground, in a spiritual sense. Nefilah, from the word nefilah. And this is seen in a well-known statement of Rabbi Yochanan, right? Say again? That's correct. That's correct. That's right. In Ashrei, which is Tehillah L'David. Actually, it's interesting. We everybody calls it Ashrei, but the truth of the matter is, Tehillim 145 begins with Tehillah L'David. The Ashrei Yoshrei Veitecha is actually taken from another psalm. So we call it Ashrei, but it's Tehillim 145, Kuf Mem Hey. And as you know, every pasuk begins with a different letter of the Aleph Beis Gimel, but it skips the letter Nun. It says Malchutcha Malchut Kol Olamim, your kingship is an eternal kingship, etc. And the next one is Samach, Mem to Samach. Somech Hashem L'chol Noflim. There was no Nun in Ashrei. Now it's true, I understand in the Dead Sea Scrolls they discovered a version of Tehillim that actually has a Nun. I'm not going to get into the archaeological. Say again? Yeah. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls has a version. But it's not the Masoretic. It's not the Masoretic text. You can see it. You can get it online. You just type in Dead Sea Scrolls Psalms, and you'll see it. But Chazal say in our text we don't have a nun. And Rav Yochanan commented why there's no nun. Mipnei ma lo nemar nun b'Ashrei. Why is there no nun in Ashrei? So Rav Yochanan says because nun connotes nefilah, as the pasuk says in Amos, describing the Galut, Nafla lo tosif kum b'sulat Yisrael. She shall fall and she will not get up, the Virgin of Israel. It is a nefilah, and David HaMelech did not want to begin a pasuk with the letter that suggests nefilah. He only mentions nefilah in the next verse, which is Somech Hashem. Hashem supports you. That's nefilah. Now, the Gemara has a parenthetical comment, though, that B'nai Ma'arava, the people of the West. Now, you know, in the Gemara, people of the West is always a reference to the land of Israel, because the Babylonian Talmud is a product of Bavel, which is where modern-day Iraq is. It's amazing how much of our Torah we have in that part of the world. And therefore, Eretz Yisrael is to the west, and therefore, the Babylonian Talmud always refers to the Eretz Yisrael people as B'Ma'arava. So it mentions B'Ma'arava, they were very optimistic. They punctuated the pasuk a little different. Instead of looking at the pasuk, Nafla, she has fallen. Lo tosif kum, she will not get up again. They read it this way. Nafla lo tosif, she will not fall anymore. Comma, kum, arise. So it's good. You live in Eretz Yisrael, you have to learn to be optimistic. This is Baruch Hashem, what we have what we have discovered. But the Babylonian Talmud was a bit stricter on this, or at least less optimistic, and therefore we don't. It offers the explanation that we don't have nun biashrei because of nefilah. So Rav Tzadok says, if nun connotes or suggests nefilah, we understand why Cheshvan is connected to the letter nun. Because after all of the Chagim, after all the Yomim Tovim, after all of the spiritual excitement and hopeful inspiration that we gained, we're back to ordinary life. There's going to be a sense of letdown. How do you sustain the excitement? How do you internalize everything that we gained? That is the great challenge. So Rav Tzadok says that is why the nun is combined with reyach, aroma. What is aroma? Aroma is what lingers after the actual thing is gone. If you had a nice roasted chicken, maybe even a good taco, here, and the chicken is gone, but the aroma can linger. If any of you ever read Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Things Past, which I have not read, actually, it's a huge novel of something like seven big volumes, but it begins with a memory that is triggered by a fragrance, by a sense, by an aroma. So my knowledge of myself is limited to the first page, but that I remember is the first page of the novel. So Rav Tzadok says, even if Cheshvan does not have the Yomim Tovim, Cheshvan still has the aroma, the reyach of the Yomim Tovim, and that is the antidote of Nefilah, by remembering, and it's really the ultimate test, because the Chazon Ish gave a very nice mashal. The Chazon Ish said, if you have a pot that's on a fire, and the pot overflows, it boils over, you don't really know if it was a full pot or a half-empty pot, because even something that's half-empty will bubble over when it's on the heat source. The only way you can tell how much is really in the pot is when it's not on the fire anymore. Then you see how high the water really is. So he says, when a person is inspired during peak moments, that does not really suggest that there's been a permanent, meaningful change in that person's life. Everybody gets inspired, when these moments happen. But if you can take it into ordinary life, that's really the sign that we have grown from the Chag. And therefore, Cheshvan, one might say, is an extremely important month because it is the litmus test of whether we can take holiness into the mundane. And the truth is, life is never mundane. Life is always miraculous. We say 3 times in the Amidah every day, Al Nisacha Shebachal Yom Imanu, for the miracles that surround us every single day of our lives. And part of being a Jew is to recognize that all of life is precious and all of life is special. But l'maisa, we are human beings, and we tend to, at some point, we get back to our old ways, automatic pilots, not thinking, not always being inspired. And Cheshvan is kind of the opportunity to carry forth. Now, that's why it's so beautiful. In fact, that right after Simchat Torah, the first week after, actually on Simchat Torah we read Breitowitz, but then the Shabbos after is, of course, Shabbat Breitowitz, which is the Shabbos of new creations, new beginnings. So I'll tell you another little Hasidic story. On the Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret, which in Israel, of course, is the same day. By the way, the confluence of emotions is so apparent. Shmini Atzeret, we recite Yizkor for our relatives who are not alive, and that is normally kind of a sad, somber moment. So in Chutz La'aretz, you kind of split it. Shmini Atzeret is Yizkor, and Simchat Torah are the Hakafot. But in Eretz Yisrael, it's all mixed together, right? You go from Hakafot to Yizkor, etc. So it's an interesting idea that all of these different emotions are combined on the very, very same day. But be it as it may, the story goes that there was Hakafot and people were dancing, but a number of yeshiva students were not really participating. So the Rabbi went over to them and said, "Why don't you dance with the Torah?" So the students said, "We're ashamed. We really haven't learned that much, so we don't have a right to rejoice with the Torah." So the Rebbe told them the following mashal, very, very nice mashal. He said, there are 2 honors that most synagogues auction off. on Simchat Torah, at least two. One is Chatan Torah. That's the privilege to finish the Torah. Usually they may give it to the rabbi, the Rosh Hashiva, but people auction. And the second is Chatan Bereshit. So although there are different customs, but I'll tell you the way the story went. The story is lavdafka reflective of the custom everywhere. It says, Chatan Torah, you always give to the most eminent member of the congregation, the rabbi, the Rosh Hashiva, etc. Chatan Bereshit, you can give to the highest bidder. Anybody who wants it gets it. Again, there are different customs, but this is what he said. What's the difference? Why is Chatan Torah only given to the great person, and Chatan Bereshit is given to anybody? So he said the following. Chatan Torah is a celebration of what you accomplished. You finished the Torah. So the one that gets Chatan Torah is the one that has the best record of accomplishment, at least in theory. Chatan Bereshit is not a celebration of what you've accomplished. It's a celebration of the new opportunities that a year is giving for you. Everybody has access to that. So the Rosh Hashiva said, whatever the past was makes no difference. You rejoice because of the notion of renewal, new beginnings. Tremendously beautiful idea, the notion of new beginnings. That what we are today doesn't have to be limited to what we were yesterday. And what we can be tomorrow doesn't have to be what we are today. We are in a position of continual change, continual flux, continual growth. And like the T-shirt says, and I'm a devotee of T-shirt sayings because I find them usually correct if they're not obscene. And that is, life is a journey, not a destination. And that is really fundamentally true because it is the process of becoming that gives our life meaning. It's not necessarily where we finally arrive, because in truth, if we truly finished our life's task, that's it, right? Why are we here? There would be no other reason to even stay another minute, So if God is giving us life, that's really a message. We still have work to do. We still have good things that we can accomplish. We still have a journey that we have to take. So that's a little bit of a meditation or perspective on the month of Cheshvan, really in the sense that this is an important month because it allows us to glory in the ordinary and to see the extraordinary in the everyday. And that's really a sign of a spiritually sensitive person. One of the most beautiful discussions in classical literature of how to develop an appreciation towards God is in the Chovas HaLevavos, Duties of the Heart, a very classic sefer. And in particular in the chapter that is called Shar HaBechina, which seems to me the gate of observation. And he really talks about the idea of simply opening our eyes and looking at what Hashem has given us in the world. The ability to breathe, the ability to walk, color, music. These are things that are not necessary for survival. We could have lived without color. But it's as if God gives you extra pleasures that are not necessary for basic survival. And he says the more one learns to notice. In fact, that's why the Hebrew word for gratitude is so instructive. Hakarat hatov. Now, if you translate it very literally, hakarat hatov is recognition of the good. The verb to express gratitude is not so much focusing on whether you say thank you. It's focusing on whether you notice there's anything to say thank you for in the first place. If you don't notice, then of course you're not going to be grateful. The first step to be grateful is the capacity to be mindful, mindfulness, noticing, paying attention, seeing. Right? That's what Hakarat HaTov is, and that is the shorish of Todah. Todah comes from the Hakarat HaTov. Okay, so that was kind of a bit of a general introduction. Now, so now I'll tell you something on the Parsha of the week. I am debating. I have a lot of stuff on Breitowitz that I wanted to share you through, but I'll talk about Noach just to try to stay in order, because if I start with the last week's Parsha, I'm going to be permanently behind, which I have been in a number of shiurim, but okay. So here is the thought I want to share with you. It's a very, very famous Rashi. It's one of the most famous Rashis in Chumash. The Torah talks about the world becoming corrupt, the world becoming evil, and primarily it is interpersonal evil. The idea of Hamas, of course, Hamas, reminds us of another Hamas that we still deal with, an epitome of evil. But Hamas is violence, gezel, that the world was simply going to pot. And there was one righteous man and his family who Hashem decided would be the one that would be saved for humanity. This is Noach, his 3 sons, and all of their wives. And the pasuk says, Noach ish tzaddik. Noach was a righteous man. Tamim haya b'dorotav. He was perfect in his generation. Et Elokim hitalech Noach. Noach walked with God. He was a loyal follower of Hashem. Now Rashi brings, really from the Gemara, it's not Rashi's invention. Rashi says that there are 2 opinions in Chazal how to understand he was perfect in his generation. Note the plural. Some say it to his credit. If a man could be righteous in a world that was so perverse and so evil, if he would have been in a generation of other righteous people, how much more so would he have been righteous? Meaning, the Torah's madgish, his great credit. He was righteous even in an evil world. Others say, right, some people always look for the negative. Some people say the struggle. Well, yeah, he was righteous compared to everybody else. But if you put him in a generation of Abraham, he would have been a 0. Lo haya nechshav lichem. Right? So first of all, why be negative? What do you mean? Some people darshan positively, some people darshan negatively. But I'll tell you a very interesting pshat from the Levush. The Levush wrote a commentary in Rashi. Rav Mordechai Yafa. The Levush, just as a historical note, was in the time of the Ramah, and it was one of the great Ashkenazic poskim at the time of the Shulchan Aruch. And in fact, he wrote a work which really was a rival to the Shulchan Aruch. And for around half a century, it was the dominant halachic code, even more than the Shulchan Aruch eventually won. And it's interesting because the Levush is actually stylistically a much superior work. Shulchan Aruch is a list of rules with no reasons given at all. Yeah. The Levush is very discursive and very analytical and gives you many reasons for the halacha. And he's still considered a great source of halacha, but in terms of authoritativeness, the Shulchan Aruch eventually superseded the Levush. We have to assume it was divine providence, one way or the other. But in addition to writing the Levush on halacha, Rav Mordechai Yafi wrote many others for him as well. Among them was a Perish, a commentary on Rashi's commentary. And the Levush says a very interesting point. He actually suggests that maybe there's no machlokas here. They are simply looking at Noach from 2 perspectives, but each would agree. I'm going to make up numbers just to illustrate. Let's imagine a perfect tzaddik is a 10. Noach was a 5, Avram was a 10. The first opinion says, well, yeah, Noach was a 5 because he was affected by his environment. If he would have been in a generation of the righteous, he wouldn't have been a 5, he would have become a 10. So the opinion that darshans l'shvach admits that Noach as he was inferior to Abraham as he was. But it's making the point, had he been with Abraham, he would have been elevated. So the second opinion is looking at Noach as he was, and the first opinion is looking at Noach as he would have been. So in point of fact, there's no machlokas. But the other thing to note is, putting even the Levush aside, is that there's a certain asymmetry in the way Chazal present the dichotomy. In the first part of the dichotomy, meaning the ones that darshan positively, if he would have been in a generation of tzaddikim, he would have been very great. The second, that darshans negatively, does not say in a generation of tzaddikim he wouldn't have been great. It specifically says in the generation of Avraham he wouldn't have been great. In other words, it is drawing a specific comparison between Noach and Avraham, and it is telling us that Noach fell short, was wanting in a certain dimension that Avraham excelled in. What is that? So the Zohar HaKadosh says, Tachazi, come and see the difference between Noach and Avraham. When Avraham Avinu is told that Hashem wants to destroy the corrupt and evil, degenerate city of Sodom. Abraham argues and he pleads and he begs and he bargains, and he's quite chutzpahdik. He says, "What if 50 people? What about 45? What about like the old Arab shuk? All these different bargaining things that you do." And of course, keep in mind, this is a question maybe we'll discuss later, that when it came to sacrificing his own son Yitzchak, Abraham didn't ask for any special treatment. Abraham didn't bargain there. But when it comes to Sodom, all of a sudden, he's arguing and bargaining. As evil as Sodom was, Abraham saw some redemptive potential, something to pray for, something to ask for. When Noach is told that God wants to destroy the world, Noach's response is, build an ark. Noach was not mispalel. This is the Zohar. Noach was not mispalel for his generation. Now it's true that Noach did not ignore his generation. Chazal say Noach spent 120 years building an ark so that people would ask him what's going on, and he would explain what was going on, and they should do tshuva because Hashem is going to bring a flood that will destroy the world, etc. But that we will call passive outreach, meaning if you come to Noach, he'll tell you what's going on, as opposed to Avraham Avinu, who opened his tent, who went out looking for people to bring to the worship of Hashem. So the Zohar says the greatness of Avraham Avinu was not only concerned with himself and his own survival. Avraham Avinu was concerned with even the Rishonim of the world, to be machnas them tachas kanfei Hashchina. And because Noach was less concerned, somewhat indifferent to the rest of that world, that is why the Mabul is entitled in Sefer Yeshayahu, Mei Noach. Remember the Shabbos Amiros? Kasher Nishbata and Yonah Matzabama Noach. Kasher Nishbata al Mei Noach. It is Noach's flood. Noach is held accountable for the flood because perhaps he could have stopped it. Now, the Meshech Chochmah says a very beautiful thought, and you're going to see how it fits the wording of the Psukim in such a great way. The Meshech Chochmah says that is why Noach had to spend 12 months. Really, read the Chumash, right? The Mabul began on the 17th day of Cheshvan. It's Machlokes in the Gemara, but generally speaking, we paskin 17th day of Cheshvan. And Noach did not emerge from the Teva until the 27th day of Cheshvan. In other words, a solar year, 365 days. Why did he need to spend a year in the Teva? If Hashem wanted to wipe out the world and just have Noach repopulate the world, that could have been done in a minute. What is the point of keeping him cooped up in that Teva for a whole year? So there's a little hint. Eliezer, Avram's faithful servant, many years after the Mabul, he had the occasion to interview the last survivor of the flood, none other than Shem, the son of Noach, who was alive for many years. Imagine the ability to interview somebody who had that memory of that event.
Also,
Huh?
Og was it?
Yeah, Og is around here, but Og wasn't giving interviews. Yeah. Right. So Shem ben Noach said, you don't want to know what life was like you said. Morning and night, some animals only ate in the day, and some animals were nocturnal, and my father was running around feeding this animal this diet, and that diet, and that diet, and once he was late with the lion, and the lion clawed off his arm, etc. What's the point? Here is the point. If Noach's character flaw was a sense of indifference and a lack of compassion for the plight of others, God did not want him to be the new Adam until he inculcated within his personality compassion, concern, achayut, responsibility, even for animals. And therefore, over the course of the year, day after day, he went through the exercise of thinking of other entities. And that slowly builds compassion, slowly builds chesed. Right? We build chesed, we build midot generally, not so much by our mental reflections, We build it by our behaviors. Virtuosity is inculcated by repetitive actions. You do, and we become what we do. This is that the Sefer HaChinuch says many, many times. Adam nifal kefi pu'ulotav. We are affected by the actions that we do. In fact, there's a very interesting statement that the Rambam says. The Rambam says, now again, this is not a halacha, so don't take it as halacha, but the Rambam says in Pirkei Avot that if a person has a choice to give a large sum of money to one tzedakah, give $1,000 once, or give $1 1,000 times, the Rambam says you should give 1,000 different times because each action builds up. It builds up. One builds up virtue by the number of actions that you do, as opposed to one big fancy action which doesn't have follow-up. And therefore Noach needed the ear. So the Meshech Chochmah says, now we understand something very, very beautiful. Let's go back to the pasuk. Noach ish tzadik tamim haya b'dorotav. So first, let's ask ourselves the question, what is the difference between the word tzaddik, righteous, and the word tamim, perfect? So Rabbi Simcha brings different makorot that say tzaddik is primarily bein adam lamakom. A tzaddik is the relationship of man to God. Tamim is bein adam lechaveiro, compassion and chesed. Now, you'll know, huh? Well, yeah, okay, well, yeah, but even there, tamim there does not refer so much to bein adam, to doing mitzvot. It refers to the attitude of not worrying about the future, and that could also be involved in interpersonal behaviors. That you're not concerned with giving of your time to other people because it'll take away from some future plan. Now, notice the word dorotav, generations. Why the plural? Because Noach was a man who lived in 2 generations. The first 2/3 of his life was pre-flood, right? The first 600 years of his life. The last third of his life was post-flood. The teva was the transition. So the way Reb Meir Simcha interprets it is this: Sadik tamim b'dorotav. In the earlier part of his life, he was sadik but not tamim. After the Mabul, he graduated to the Madrega of Tamim. And that's why, tremendous diuk, listen to this diuk. When Hashem tells Noach to go into the ark, he says, go into the ark, ki otcha ra'iti sadik lefonai b'dor hazeh, because I have seen you as a sadik go into the ark. Rashi raises the question right away. If Noach is described as sadik tamim, why does Hashem tell him to go into the ark? Because he's tzaddik. So Rashi gives an answer that when you praise a person to his face, you don't want him to get a swelled head. You only give part of Noach was tzaddik tamim, but when Hashem is talking to Noach, he only calls him tzaddik. But according to the Meshech Chochmah, it's so beautiful because when Hashem tells Noach to go into the teva before the Mabul, he is only a tzaddik. Tamim is what he acquired afterwards. And that is why, in retrospect, when the Torah is describing Noach as he eventually became tzaddik and tamim, but at the time of the Mabul, when he went into the teva, he was only a tzaddik. But that's the Meshech Chochmah. But the point I wanted to conclude with is this. So we can look at Noach and we can say, oh, Noach didn't care enough, he could have done more, etc. But in reality, one has to understand something. Why didn't Noach? Why wasn't Noach more involved with trying to change his society? And the truth of the matter is, Noach actually had a pretty rational calculation, which even though it may be an evil, it might very well be a necessary evil. Noach was worried that if he got too involved in the corrupt society that he was surrounded with, he would be dragged down. Noach needed to have a philosophy of insularity, a philosophy of separation, because he understood very well how dangerous a negative environment is, particularly when there's no one else that is representing a positive environment. And therefore, Noach had to play it safe, as a matter of self-preservation. You know, they tell a story, the Baal Tanya had a student who he felt was hanging around with bad influences. So he told the student, he says, you know, you really shouldn't hang around with those people. So the student had a brilliant response. The student, you know, Rabbi, I'm not a person who gets influenced. After all, I've been with you for so many years, and I haven't become so righteous. So don't worry about me. I can be with them. I'm not going to become a bad guy, right? I don't get influenced by people. So the Baal Tanya says, no, you have to understand, it's much easier to be influenced by negative influences than positive. And he brought a raya, a proof from a halakha. The halakha is that if something tameh, let's say a dead animal, just touches something tahor, the tuma is communicated. Meaning if a dead animal touches a vegetable or a fruit or a person even, again, just to be sure you understand this, when an animal is properly shechted, it is not tameh. Meat is not tameh. But if an animal died without shechita, there is tumat nevela, that's called. Certainly a dead human body conveys tumah. So impurity is conveyed by mere touch. On the other hand, kedusha is not. If a korban touches some vegetables, the vegetables do not become holy unless they are cooked with the korban. Then they absorb the taste, and then you have to eat it like the korban. So what do you see? Tumah, the Baal Tanya says, is transferred by negiah, casual contact, but kedusha requires bishul, total cooking, total immersion. And therefore the Baal Tanya says, just because I haven't influenced you, doesn't mean you're not going to be influenced by the negative influence. So in reality, therefore, we shouldn't look at Noach, God forbid, as someone that was indifferent, as someone that didn't care. We have to look at Noach, and indeed there's a certain tragedy in Noach. I mean, for example, why did Noach plant a vineyard right after the Mabul? And again, the simple pshat is that Noach had a sense of despondency. I mean, just put ourselves in his shoes. The whole world is gone, destroyed. You're a survivor, that's a great blessing. But what on earth are you going to do? How are you going to take care of this? There's loneliness, there's a sense of isolation. And a person wants to kill that despair by drinking. That's a very, very natural response. Noach was overwhelmed with despondency. And therefore there is a concept that Noach was prone to these negative influences. And therefore he needed to withdraw, as difficult as that might be. Now Rav Hutner points out that there are two architectural structures in the Torah. There is the Ark of Noach, the Teva of Noach, and there's the Mishkan, The difference between Teva and Mishkan is Teva hermetically seals the good inside so it will not be engulfed by the wild and wicked waters on the outside. That the Teva represents insularity, protection, withdrawing. The Mishkan is the opposite. The Mishkan radiates the light of holiness outward. And therefore, these are the two ideas. Noach represents the Teva, and Avram Avinu already represents the idea of Mishkan, spreading holiness to ever-widening circles. But here's Rav Hutner's subtlety. Rav Hutner's subtlety is that the same way in human and Jewish chronology, the Teva preceded the Mishkan, so too in our own individual lives. There needs to be a certain aspect of Teva that we need before we are ready for the Mishkan. Meaning to say, before a person will truly be able to spread the light of Torah, Yahadut, Mitzvot, there needs to be a certain aspect of their life in which they try to remove themselves from negative and destructive influences, to build up a fortitude, build up a strength, build up an understanding, build up a commitment. And then they will be able to give and to share and to be open to what others have to offer them as well. Suffice it to say, it's not the direct topic tonight, that in any form of Jewish outreach, every person has to understand that when we try to help another person become more observant, it is not simply we have the wisdom and we are, speaking from high to low. Obviously, there is mutual sharing in which we open our hearts for the insights that each person is offering as well. There is a shared learning and a shared growing, and without that respect, one cannot be successful because one is simply being patronizing or condescending. But at the same time, there has to be a certain stage in a person's life in which sometimes a certain amount of insularity is necessary. Now, how you strike this balance, this is obviously a very live issue in the Jewish world now, on many, many different levels. The notion of insularity, separation, versus openness, sharing. And obviously the higher goal, as you see from the Mishkan, is openness and sharing. But we have to be cognizant of the danger. Something might be the higher goal, but it may have also many more risks than the lower goal. So do you play it safe, or do you play it great? This is a dilemma of life, really. The potential for greatness is certainly much more on the side of openness and mutual learning, but there's also a greater potential for failure. And therefore, at different points, different families, different societies, different times in Jewish history, and even different times in our own personal lives, we sometimes need insularity, we sometimes need openness. And the trick of life, and the trick of how we raise our children, is when to do one, when to do the other, how to know what is good that we can take in, and what is not good that we have to be able to reject. And in many ways, as is always the case, any type of all or nothing behavior is always easier than making reasoned discriminations. One might say, everything outside of the Beit HaMidrash is pasol, treif, I don't want anything to do with it. That's one modality. The other is, I embrace the totality of the world with all that it offers. And those are simplistic on both sides of the equation. But to be able to discriminate, that takes great chachma. As indeed the Gemara says, Motzei Shabbat, right, in the fourth bracha of the Amidah, we have a paragraph that we add, Motzei Shabbat, Motzei Yom Tov, about Havdalah, to be Mavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. Now the Gemara asks the question in brachos, why do I put that bracha, or that Havdalah, in the fourth bracha? So the Gemara's answer is, because the fourth bracha is about chachma and dat. And it says, im ein dat, without a deep knowledge and understanding, Havdalah min ayin. How will you able to discriminate between the good and the bad, the or and the choshech, the kodesh and the chol? So it takes a great, great deal of das. So in a sense, the tahalich, the movement from Noach to Avram, represents kind of an evolutionary, we're not dealing with the issue of evolution, but an evolutionary development in spiritual consciousness, starting with insularity, and then moving to inclusiveness. But you needed that insularity. It's not that the insularity bad, inclusiveness is good. Rather, the talich tells me that you need to incorporate both of those things. So, how you do it? Again, I don't have concrete answers. Maybe we'll discuss it further as we go through the different parshiot of the avot. But again, it's something to think about. Again, I also want to add one little disclaimer, that when we say things that may be a little critical of Noach, we do have to realize, of course, the phenomenal righteousness of a man who was able to serve God in spite of a whole world that went the other way. And I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I suspect if I would have been at the time of the flood, I might not have been one of the survivors. So when we speak about Noach, we have to realize that we are talking about a person of phenomenal greatness. By the way, there are a lot of other interesting issues. Again, maybe I'll cover them next time. How do you understand the flood story in light of the Gilgamesh epic? There are a lot of historical issues. Was the flood truly global or was it not? Because I'll tell you this, the Gemara in Zvachim, it's a Gemara, actually brings a machlokas that there is an opinion there was no Mabul in the land of Israel. That the Eretz Yisrael was spread from Mabul. Now, that immediately gives rise. Say again?
It's a reference to Mount Ararat.
Yes.
We're talking about there wasn't a flood in Israel.
Yes.
There would have been a flood in Iraq or maybe or
Yeah, that's correct. The Asia Minor, in the Middle East, it was in the Middle East, but not in Eretz Yisrael proper. Now, that immediately gives rise to an interesting possibility. Well, if there was no flood in the land of Israel, could there have been human beings who lived in Israel, Eretz Yisrael, who were spared? Now that's a very, very interesting point. And then it would turn out Noach would not be the only one. But the Gemara seems to indicate it. I'm just quoting the Gemara without getting into all of the possibilities here. The Gemara seems to indicate that even if there was no Mabul in Eretz Yisrael, all living creatures were wiped out simply from the heat. The water around was boiling hot water, and apparently, except for the fish. Again, the fish did not die, and that's also an interesting question how that works.
They don't get cooked.
Well, normally fish get cooked. yeah. But all I'm saying is that if you look at Gemara Zavachim, Kuf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, however you interpret the Gemara exactly, the Gemara seems to indicate that even if the Mabul did not reach the land of Israel, all life, even in Eretz Yisrael, did die. So Chazal, in the Gemara at least, do not acknowledge the possibility of survivors, other than the people who kind of hung around on the outside of the ark and the like. But again, interesting questions. Yeah.
No, the Kriya Kar indicates that the whole world needed to go through a mikvah, except for Eretz Yisrael.
Eretz Yisrael was already tar. Right.
It says also that that was supposed to be a mabul, but mabul's not necessarily water, not necessarily destructive, but it was supposed to be mayim is Torah, so it could have been Torah, but because they were bad, it was a flood, it was disastrous. So maybe Eretz Yisrael got the mayim.
Yeah, but although Lamais, as I say, the Gemara indicates whoever was in Eretz Yisrael died, so it didn't result in a survival. But yeah, I hear. By the way, one thing about that, the pasuk says the Mabul began in the 600th year of Noach. Right? When Noach was 600 or 599 in his 600th year. The Zohar HaKadosh remarks that in the 6th century of the 6th millennium, which is 5600, what does it say? It says that the heavens will open up, the windows of heaven will open, and there will be great water. So the Zohar says, this is a prediction actually, that in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, there will be great, great wisdom released upon the world, drawing the idea that Mayim is Chachma. And indeed, it kind of corresponds with the Industrial Revolution and the like, as well as a phenomenal growth in Torah learning. This was the age of the Vilna Gaon, the Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and the like. And the Zohar correlates it as a remez to the Mayanot Tahom and the Mayim of Chachma that come into the world. Okay, you all will have a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh Tov.